Today I will be talking about adolescent brain development. My question is, how do violent video games impact the development of the adolescent brain? Adolescents today are inundated with an overwhelming amount of media. Kids are practically forced to grow up with access to iPhones, iPads, computers, and inevitably violent video games. While companies try to safeguard their children by creating safeguards, inevitably, these children are still getting a hold of violent video games. So the question is, why? Many companies do not create proper restrictions to stop children from getting a hold of these video games, inevitably leaving children vulnerable to mature content. A national study by the National Institute of Medical Health states that the brain does not reach adult maturity until its early 20s, showing that children of younger ages are not fully developed enough to comprehend what's happening. A study done by the Palo Alto Medical Foundation found that nearly 27% of teens play video games, whereas 67% of households play video games. This leaves a 30% margin of difference, showing that the mass majority of individuals that play video games in the household are teens. In the gaming industry, nearly 28% of games are rated teen, whereas only 15.5% are rated mature. So, although the vast majority of video games are non-violent, this 15.5% creates a large portion of the annual revenue for the gaming companies. Actually, $2 billion of revenue a year. This means that the gaming companies creating mature video games have practically created a monopoly for themselves, leaving them almost indestructible. These days, screen-on-screen contact for youth is about 50 hours on average. A study done by the Kastner Family Foundation reports it's a full-time job plus 10 hours of overtime, and that's just the national average. This must leave a long-term impact on adolescent intelligence. Dan Hurley from the New York Times writes that long-term memory is to crystallize intelligence, as working intelligence is to fluid intelligence. For example, crystallized intelligence is taking a language for 3 years and asking to recall the information from the previous 2 years. So using long-term memory. Whereas fluid intelligence is working memory. Working memory is more important than the ability to remember a phone number. It is the capability to recall something in one's head and manipulate it. For example, to add or subtract, or to take numbers and place them in a high to low order. Playing violent video games isn't all bad. There are some positive attributes. For example, playing violent video games can be proven to help children release their aggressive anxieties, helping them to go through the day with a more positive mentality. It also helps children distribute the difference between fantasy and reality. This is strongly argued between philosophers, but for the most part, it does help children realize the difference between reality and fantasy. Dr. Andrew Przysky of Oxford University reveals interesting research on the generation gap. Analysis indicate that older individuals are 5 times more likely to believe that violent video games cause violence, whereas younger individuals are 2.5 times more likely to state that the use of violent video games helps them release their aggressive tendencies. In an essay done by Lawrence Kuttner and Cheryl L. Colson, they discovered a large portion of violent video game connections to adolescent crime. 44.4% of all boys have stated they've been in a fight, whereas 51% of these boys state that they have played violent video games, while 60% of those who have beat someone up have also stated they play violent video games. Of the 18.6% of individuals who enjoyed damaging property for fun, stated that 23% of these enjoyed playing violent video games. Only 10% of these individuals had never played violent video games or partaken in that. Of the 52% of children in school, 52.9% of them had become in trouble with their teachers or faculty. 60% of these individuals had played violent video games, while the rest of that percentile had never played them at all. Violent video games impair adolescent development by triggering unwarranted aggression and delaying social development. Despite these alarming projections, the gaming industry neglects to present proper safeguards in helping children properly play recreational electronics.
Okay, very good. Okay, you mentioned, and it was a statistic that wasn't too surprising to me, that older people were more likely to connect violence to the video games and all of that, which I would definitely concur with that. And of course, there's this whole denial thing too, like fat people saying that pie didn't make me fat. So what I'm wondering is, video games have been around for a while. Violent video games have been around for a while. This argument has been around for a while. Did you see anything in research that indicated surveying older people who had played violent video games when they were younger, and their reaction to that as they've gotten older?
Yeah, so I would say back in 2000, the average age for a gamer was about 32. So the gaming industry was going out into the field and projecting it more towards older individuals because they were the ones with money and the time to put towards this, where children were more outside doing things, maybe not so much in 2000, but over time they've become more like antisocial. And this is largely because gaming industries have put so much of their projections onto children. So children are more almost at risk to becoming susceptible of these addictions because gaming industries have pretty much aimed straight for them.
Right.
So they start with games like Sims and EA games, and they push them more to Halo and Call of Duty and things like that intentionally.
Yeah. Okay, so the gaming industry has put the little rating system out there and said, okay, done, our obligation has been removed, and obviously it's not very successful. Any idea of a possible counter to that or something additional? Did you see anything? Is anybody out there saying, not working, we need to do something else, and offered any possible solutions?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few solutions. The Palo Alto institution that I mentioned earlier, they reference that only 23% of adults, like parents, actually look at the restrictions on their children's games. So they were trying to find a new development on how to stop this. But honestly, it's research that people aren't putting too much money into because no one wants to go up to the big boss of the gaming industry.
I gotcha. Okay, great.
So
Thank you.
Okay.
Good job.